The Kansas City Chiefs have dropped their initial depth chart for the 2024 season ahead of the initial preseason game against the Jacksonville Jaguars, and there are definitely some talking points to go over, so let's get right into it. But real quick, if you like or appreciate what it is that I do on the channel, hitting the like button really does help me out, as it tells YouTube to share this video with other Kansas City Chiefs fans. If you find yourself here by chance but not design, the Kansas City Chiefs are the only thing I talk about on this channel, dropping multiple videos every single week, so consider hitting the subscribe button. First of all, let's just start at the top where the depth chart itself starts at the wide receiver position, and who knows which one is number 1 and number 2 between Rashee Rice and Hollywood Brown, but they are the number 1 and number 2 wide receivers listed on this depth chart. It's really worth taking into account the top 4 in order to get a good look at things. Hollywood Brown, Rashee Rice are going to be the 2 primary targets. The next 2 guys on the field, Xavier Worthy and Justin Watson, the majority, I think I started that word with a B, the majority of the snaps will be those 4 guys right there as of right now. Will Justin Watson be the number 4 wide receiver by the time we get to the end of the season? I don't know, but right now he is. And as such, he will be one of the only 4 guys that get a whole lot of snaps. Last season at the wide receiver position for the Kansas City Chiefs, Rashee Rice led the way with 622 snaps, then MVS with 618, Justin Watson with 536, and Sky Moore with 495. That's basically 4 players over the 500 snap mark. The next player, the 5th wide receiver, was Kadarius Toney, all the way down at 230 snaps. Last season, 9 total wide receivers got snaps for the Kansas City Chiefs, but really it was kind of just 8, as Richie James, Justin Ross, and Mecole Hardman had 137, 136, and 125 snaps respectively, and then it fell all the way down to Montrell Washington with 2 snaps during the season. And with those top 4 names there, Hollywood Brown, Rashee Rice, Justin Watson, Xavier Worthy, I don't think I foresee a whole lot of jostling around. I think those are going to be the top 4 guys. I think that Hollywood Brown and Rashee Rice are going to be 1 and 2. Depending on the day, one of them might be over the other, etc. But I think that Justin Watson and Xavier Worthy are the next in line right now. The second biggest surprise to me as far as the wide receiver depth chart is concerned is that Sky Moore is there at the 3rd spot at one of those wide receivers. He is either the 5th or 6th wide receiver on the depth chart. That is absolutely mind-blowing to me, not because of my own observations of who Sky Moore is, but really what we have seen from him in training camp thus far. This tells me that maybe the opening staves of training camp have not meant all that much to this depth chart, and maybe they are going to rely more heavily on what a wide receiver can do in game time. But I just don't know what has been there from Sky Moore to justify him playing above a guy like Mecole Hardman, him playing above a guy like Nico Remigio. Both of those players have had, pretty objectively, better training camps than has Sky Moore. Sky Moore has had a couple seasons of productivity in the NFL, that much is true. He is a 250-yard per season wide receiver, that much is true. And when you're looking at things sort of objectively, if your wide receivers, if Sky Moore is your number 6 wide receiver, probably doing pretty well. Again, last season he was the number 4 guy for the Kansas City Chiefs. So if Sky Moore, a guy who's capable of 250 receiving yards in the NFL, is your number 6 wide receiver, it's not so bad. But foreseeing Mecole Hardman, Nico Remigio, and even, I would argue, Kadarius Toney behind him on the depth chart, that becomes a little bit aggravating. Even, arguably, Justin Ross being behind him on the depth chart. And this is where we have to start getting into the actual number of wide receivers the Kansas City Chiefs are going to carry this season. We have seen the Chiefs swear up and down that Kadarius Toney has too much talent. He's just too talented a guy, and they're not wrong. But when you look at this, you are looking at 8 players listed above him on the depth chart. He has been injured, but we're going to get into a little bit later that maybe doesn't mean anything. But if I were to ask you right now, how many wide receivers do the Kansas City Chiefs take? How many wide receivers do the Kansas City Chiefs keep, pardon me? You would probably say either 6 or 7. Well, 6 right now means that you're cutting Mecole Hardman, Nico Remigio, and Kadarius Toney. 7 means you're cutting Kadarius Toney and either Nico Remigio or Mecole Hardman. Now, stepping back from the active roster, one of the things that is becoming apparent to me, in my opinion, Cornell Powell, of all of the rest of these wide receivers left, has the least likely chance of making the practice squad. And I know he's been on the practice squad forever, but looking at these other names, he provides the least upside. He does not provide return opportunities the way that Montrell Washington does, the way that I think Jaron Hyatt could. He does not present the receiving upside of someone as big as Kyle Sheets, as sneaky as Jaron Hyatt, as sort of utilitarian as Phillip Brooks. So we may have seen our last of Cornell Powell with the Kansas City Chiefs. Moving on to the line here. Left tackle, starting Kingsley Suamataia. Left guard, Joe Thuney. Center, Creed Humphrey. Right guard, Trey Smith. Right tackle, Jawan Taylor. No surprises there. The only interesting note is that Kingsley Suamataia is the starting left tackle definitively as far as the first depth chart is concerned. Moving to the second string, we get a couple more surprises. Wanye Morris is the backup left tackle, not a surprise, but I think that he is not the backup left tackle. I think he is the backup swing tackle, so he will be on either side. Mike Caliendo has experience, and he has been here before, so I guess those are the same things, aren't they? But Mike Caliendo provides the veteran leadership on the second string offensive line. He was pretty definitively going to be there. Hunter Nourzad at the second string center makes sense, even though we haven't seen a whole lot of it. CJ Hansen being the backup right guard. I think that probably Mike Caliendo is the backup right guard as well, but we haven't seen a whole lot of positives from CJ Hansen, at least observable positives from a distance in training camp thus far. And Lucas Niang at that second string right tackle spot. You kind of could project all of this except for, in my opinion, CJ Hansen from what has gone on in training camp. The one thing that I will say is that Ethan Driscoll has gotten some shine. He has gotten some first-team reps along the way. So I think if you were going to project something, Lucas Niang might be in trouble for Ethan Driscoll. Moving on to that third-string offensive line, Ethan Driscoll is a guy that I think is going to make the practice squad this season so long as he clears waivers. I'm not positive he will clear waivers. McCade Mettauer, Griffin McDowell, Nick Torres, Chuck Godric, and Griffin McDowell listed as a tackle as well for some reason. I'm not sure any of those guys. Chuck Godric has the best chance, but I'm not sure any of those other guys will be practice squad players this season. If the Chiefs do decide to carry a couple offensive linemen on the practice squad, they might be from extracurricular activities by Brett Veach. Somebody somewhere is going to cut another offensive lineman, and he might be a guy that Brett Veach wants to stash on the Chiefs practice squad. At the tight end position here, we have Travis Kelce starting in something of a surprise move. Noah Gray as the second tight end and Jared Wiley as the third tight end. Okay. Maybe this is a nod to the veteran. Noah Gray has had a good camp. Jared Wiley has looked like he might come in and be a game-changing talent for the Kansas City Chiefs. Irv Smith Jr., I guess I should say, as the number 4 tight end. The Kansas City Chiefs might keep 4 tight ends. Noah Gray and Irv Smith look very similar to me on the field. Baylor Cupp is a guy that is sort of a Jared Wiley, Travis Kelce sized guy. I don't think that he has the movement skills of either of those two. I do think that he has Blake Bell-type potential. He could be a great big battering ram for the offense. Jorquarius Spivey there as the 6th, tight end. I think it is going to be a race between Baylor Cupp and Jorquarius Spivey as far as who is going to be the practice squad tight end. I do like Baylor Cupp in that race. But Jorquarius Spivey does look like he could carry on the Jody Fortson legacy here in Kansas City as a great big wide receiver that is not particularly tight endish and not particularly wide receiverish. At the running back position, another of those Noah Gray, Jared Wiley type deals for me. Isaiah Pacheco obviously is the starter. But then we have Clyde Edwards-Helaire at number 2 and Deneric Prince at number 3. I mark my words, Deneric Prince will be the number 2 running back by week 4. I think he's going to be the number 2 running back by week 1. That said, we do know what Clyde Edwards-Helaire brings to the table. It might not be terribly much upside, but it's a very high floor for this Kansas City Chiefs offense. Keontae Ingram, should he decide to stick around, I don't think the Kansas City Chiefs will keep Keontae Ingram unless he wants to be a practice squad player and clears waivers. I think that Louis Rees-Zammit has a higher upside than does Keontae Ingram, even if the floor is much, much, much lower on LRZ than it is on Keontae Ingram. We know Keontae Ingram can play running back in the NFL. Louis Rees-Zammit is still a question mark. So I think if anybody here is a practice squad guy, I don't think Keontae Ingram would be. Imani Bailey might be. Louis Rees-Zammit might be. They might keep him on the roster for his special teams capacity, etc. At the quarterback position there, big upset with Patrick Mahomes wrestling the starting spot away from Carson Wentz. Chris Oladokun being number 3 and Ian Book number 4. I think that Chris Oladokun, so obviously the number 1 and number 2 spots we don't have to talk about. Number 3 and number 4, Chris Oladokun has always been a bit of a misfit in the Andy Reid offense as far as I'm concerned. Ian Book is a guy that has a bit more accuracy, a lot less movement skills, at least as far as I can tell. So I think there could be an upset for the number 3 spot in Kansas City, but it does not look like that is the case at this point. If you remember, when we were talking about the running back position there, we did not list a certain name. A certain fan favorite name was left off of that list. That name, of course, Carson Steele, who is officially listed as a fullback, and Andy Reid's everywhere are rejoicing. Carson Steele at the fullback position is an interesting quirk of this roster. How do you make that work if you're going to carry 4 running backs? I don't think you do. I think you carry 3 running backs. You carry Isaiah Pacheco, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and Deneric Prince, and then you have your fullback as the fullback and the emergency running back. Moving on to the defense and the cornerback position in particular, we have a couple of surprises here. And remember earlier when I was talking about Kadarius Toney and how injuries might not matter as far as the depth chart is concerned. Sometimes when a player is coming back from injury, you see him pushed all the way back down the depth chart and he has to earn his spot back. I thought that might be what was going on with Kadarius Toney until I saw Jaylen Watson listed as the number 2. The number 3 cornerback, the backup to Trent McDuffie at one cornerback position. Jaylen Watson hasn't practiced but a couple days this season so far. So to see Kadarius Toney all the way down the depth chart is not a matter of being injured. It is where the Chiefs have him. The cornerback position, not a whole lot of surprises here. I am again in the Jaylen Watson is a starting cornerback camp. The Chiefs currently have 2 listed starting cornerback spots, Trent McDuffie and Joshua Williams. So here's the deal. Look at that top 4 of the cornerback position. Trent McDuffie, Joshua Williams, Jaylen Watson, and Nazeeh Johnson. Does anything stick out to you? Well, of course, these are all players that the Kansas City Chiefs have drafted. If you can get your top 4 corners as players that you have drafted, you're doing a good job at a position in the NFL. A very difficult to select, difficult to draft, difficult to scout, difficult to collect position. Cornerbacks are a rare thing to get right in the NFL. The Chiefs did draft Trent McDuffie, Joshua Williams, Jaylen Watson, and Nazeeh Johnson in the same draft. All of those guys became Kansas City Chiefs the same year. Trent McDuffie in the first round, Joshua Williams in the 5th, Jaylen Watson and Nazeeh Johnson both were 7th rounders. The Chiefs got their top 4 corners in the same draft. Absolute madness for the Kansas City Chiefs. But even more crazy, you go down that next spot, Ekow Boye-Doe, who is either the 5th or the 6th corner for the Kansas City Chiefs, was an undrafted rookie free agent. Chamari Connor was drafted by the Chiefs. So your top 6 are all... So first off, Chamari Connor listed as a corner here when he is normally sort of thought of as a safety, but your top 6 cornerbacks are all acquisitions by this Chiefs training camp, or this Chiefs coaching staff and front office out of college. One more step, Kelvin Joseph and Keith Taylor find themselves as the 7th and 8th corners. This is very surprising to me. Let me tell you why. Both of them have worked in with the first-team defense this season. Both of them have some very impressive credentials. Not impressive in a sort of pre-made NFL star way, but impressive as far as what it is to be an athlete in the NFL, for sure. And to find out that those guys are 7th and 8th on the depth chart is madness. One more step down, Nick Jones and Miles Battle. Miles Battle, you will note here, listed above 7th round pick Kamal Hadden. Miles Battle is my pick for UDFA Surprise of the Year. He might spend a year on the practice squad, but I think he is an eventual NFL player. He has a lot of tools. Nick Jones being listed this far down, not the greatest thing. Kamal Hadden looks in trouble of making the roster at this juncture. Nick Jones, here's the thing I will say. If the Chiefs are going to make a move on a corner, if the Chiefs are going to trade away some of this value, maybe it's Ekow Boye-Doe, but probably not. Probably it would be Kelvin Joseph or Keith Taylor. These are guys that you invested in whom you have invested nothing. You picked them up as free agents, and you don't have draft capital in them, you don't have a whole lot of money in them, if you move on from these guys, you're basically, so you trade Kelvin Joseph and Keith Taylor as a bundle package. This never happens. I'm just making up the most extreme scenario, to the 49ers because they're going to draft very late in the draft. You trade both of those guys to the 49ers for a single 7th-round pick. You're coming out ahead because of the level of investment that you made in these guys. So I guess that's sort of my take on the cornerback position there. At linebacker, Drew Tranquill, Nick Bolton, and Leo Chanel as the starters. No surprises there, except that Nick Bolton is still out of football. At the backup spots there, you have Curtis Jacobs, Jack Cochran, and Cole Christensen. Seeing Cole Christensen as a backup linebacker as opposed to later than that, 3rd string or so, is a little bit of a surprise at this point. He has a high floor as far as roster inclusion goes because he is a very good special teamer, but I don't know that he offers a whole lot of upside on the defense. Maybe I'm wrong. Jack Cochran as the backup middle linebacker. We saw a little hint of that yesterday. Curtis Jacobs as a backup outside linebacker. So he's over Cam Jones. Cam Jones listed as an inside linebacker. Curtis Jacobs at this point looks set to make the roster. Cam Jones maybe does not. Swayze Bozeman is the last listed linebacker. I do not foresee him being a roster player or a practice squad guy. At the safety position, Justin Reed and Brian Cook, the 2 listed starters. You can throw Jaden Hicks on the field for any given number of plays there as well, and that is pretty much what you expected to see. But guys, I guess it kind of falls off quick after that point, doesn't it? Deon Bush is a career-long special teamer in the NFL. He's not a guy that gets a whole lot of work on defense. Chris Roland Wallace and DJ Miller are both guys that entered the league as UDFA who played cornerback in college. So that is an interesting thing to see there. Tyree Gillespie is the last listed safety. Unlikely, it would seem, at this point to make the roster. They are familiar with Gillespie. Gillespie has NFL experience. If they are currently listing both Chris Roland Wallace and DJ Miller above Tyree Gillespie, it would seem as if he is destined to be not one of the 53 players that makes the roster, and maybe not a practice squatter either. Probably the Chiefs do not keep 6 safeties on the roster, meaning that either Chris Roland Wallace or DJ Miller, if they pass through waivers, could end up back on the practice squad for the Kansas City Chiefs. The defensive ends are split up here, but I will go through those as a group. Mike Dana and George Karlaftis listed as the current starters, no surprise there. Felix Enudike-Uzoma and Malik Herring listed as the second string guys, no real surprise there, though Malik Herring is a guy that you just can't shake from the roster. He's a UDFA guy out of Georgia. He was a difference maker for the Bulldogs while he played there. Hasn't really been much of a factor yet in the NFL, but he's a guy who can get on the field and not embarrass your defense, which is a positive, especially for the defensive end position. Charles Omenihu still listed as the 3rd string there, along with Truman Jones. Truman Jones is a guy that I was hoping to see move up the depth chart this season. But I will say that at this point, if Charles Omenihu starts the season on the injured reserve, last year the Chiefs carried 5 defensive ends into the season: George Karlaftis, Mike Dana, Malik Herring, Felix Enudike-Uzoma, and B.J. Thompson. At this point, with Charles Omenihu on the IR, Truman Jones would make the Week 1 53-man roster. Owen Carney and B.J. Thompson would not. Owen Carney, from my observations, is a strong candidate for the practice squad because he does remind me a lot of Malik Herring, and I think that the Chiefs probably factored that in when signing him so he could spend a year on the practice squad and end up being Malik Herring whenever Malik Herring is not with the Kansas City Chiefs any longer. Ultimately, I think that Truman Jones does make the squad this season, and I think he will get a few reps. I don't know what's going on with B.J. Thompson. I don't know. Those certainly sounded like retirement symptoms to me with what went on with his health. Certainly, I hope for the best for him. It's just worrisome to see somebody who has those types of things happen strap on a football helmet. So I don't know where things stand with him. At the defensive tackle position, again, a guy who is injured, being pushed down on the depth chart, but it might not be because of injury, because we see players like Jalen Watson coming back from injury into their rightful spots on the roster, but we will proceed in this fashion. Starters, Chris Jones and Tershawn Wharton. They are optimizing for mobility with that pairing at the top of the depth chart. Both Tershawn Wharton's a little bit undersized, and Chris Jones is known more for his movement skills, more for his pass rushing capabilities than he is as a run stopper. So that is an interesting pairing if that is to carry forward. Behind them, Mike Pennell and Neil Farrell are both guys who are supposedly run-stopping defensive tackles. Last year, the Chiefs... So I agree with everything to this point, right? Last season, the Kansas City Chiefs carried 5 defensive tackles onto the 53-man roster, which means that either Fabian Levette or Matt Dickerson would be your 5th guy there. My money of this group would be on Fabian Levette. Fabian Levette has definitely flashed in drills this preseason. Hopefully we get a big taste of him during the Jaguars preseason game to see what he is able to do at the NFL level. Then you get to that last coupling there, and you realize Derek Nottie was pushed all the way down on the depth chart, along with Alex Gubner, another UDFA at the defensive tackle position. Man, that is rough. That is rough. I don't see that being the case. I don't see that lasting. Maybe this is just you have to treat some guys different than others when they are coming back from injury, but to this point, Jalen Watson has missed almost as much action as has Derek Nottie, and Jalen Watson walks right back in, traipses onto the field as the number 3 cornerback. So it is difficult to understand sometimes the reasoning, I guess, behind these things, but that is what we have for Derek Nottie going forward. I believe Man, it's hard. Derek Nottie makes the team, right? Where do you put him? If Neil Farrell is finally coming on, Neil Farrell's a big guy. He looks like he could be a run stopper. Do you jet Derek Nottie all the way up to that spot on the roster? Then you have Neil Farrell fall down beside either Fabian Levette or Matt Dickerson. Who do you put on the practice squad? Alex Gubner is an interesting type of player. I don't know if he makes the practice squad. Matt Dickerson is a veteran. The rules for the practice squad have changed a little bit, but if you're Matt Dickerson, do you want to stay on the practice squad? I guess if you're going to keep picking up paychecks for playing football. But overall, at the defensive tackle position, it looks to me like this depth chart really just raises more questions than answers. The only other really notable thing here is down there at punt returner and kick returner. Xavier Worthy is currently listed as the number 1 punt returner, which is sort of strange because I'm pretty sure that Dave Tobe, when he made his comments on punt returners the other day, kind of threw Xavier Worthy in there as a he can do it too kind of comment, which would lead you to believe that he was further down on that depth chart. But maybe this is only for the first preseason game because you have Mecole Hardman, who you know what he's like back there at punt returner. He's returned punts before, I'm pretty sure. And then you have Nico Remigio at third, so you want to throw Xavier Worthy out there on the field early in the preseason, so you list him number 1 at the punt returner just to see what he can do, I guess. I don't really know. And then we have it at kick returner. The number 1 kick returner at this point is Nico Remigio, the undrafted rookie, or not rookie free agent, second-year free agent, out of Fresno State. This could be his path onto the roster. Kind of confoundingly, this is where you would think that Louis Rees-Zammit would have his day in the sun at kick returner, but he finds himself as the third guy. Now, you're going to have 2 probably out there at this point. That would be Nico Remigio and Mecole Hardman, leaving Louis Rees-Zammit off the field again. So we will see what happens in that case. If you like or appreciate what it is that I do here, hitting the like button really does help me out, as it tells YouTube to share this video with other Kansas City Chiefs fans. And if you find yourself here by chance but not design, consider hitting the subscribe button, because the Kansas City Chiefs are the only thing I talk about on this channel, dropping multiple videos every single week, and I hope to have you back for the next one.